I should have walked away the moment she opened the door. Or at least pretended I didn't notice the way she looked at me, like she'd been waiting longer than she'd ever admit. But instead, I stood there, holding a cheap toolkit I barely knew how to use, and she smiled like I'd brought her something rare. "Hey," she said, almost a whisper. "You came fast." Her voice carried this warm, low note that slid under my skin. She wasn't dressed up, not really. A loose sweater, soft-looking, sleeves pushed up like she'd been doing something before I arrived. But she carried herself like she didn't need an excuse to look beautiful. I stepped inside, and I swear the air shifted. Quiet house. Too quiet. Like she'd turned the whole place down to a low hum. "The Wi-Fi keeps cutting out," she said, leading me toward the living room. "I figured you'd know what to do. You're good with this stuff." I wasn't, not really. But the way she said it, gentle confidence, almost trusting, made me want to be. Her living room light was warm, dimmer than I remembered. Late afternoon sun touched the floor. Her scent, something soft, clean, like warm laundry and faint perfume, drifted close when she leaned near the router. "It's been blinking like this all morning," she said, crouching down. When she looked up at me from that angle, hair falling over one eye, I forgot what blinking she was talking about. I knelt beside her. Too close. Not close enough. My hand brushed hers when I reached for the cable. A tiny accidental swipe, but it pulled her eyes to mine. Her breath hitched, subtle, barely there, but real. "Sorry," I murmured. "It's fine." But she didn't move her hand right away. Her sweater slipped at the shoulder when she leaned forward again, revealing just the hint of a freckle I'd never noticed. My chest tightened for reasons I didn't want to analyze. I focused on the router like it was a life-or-death puzzle. She hovered beside me, giving directions that didn't help, pretending not to watch me while absolutely watching me. "So, how's school?" she asked, voice too light, like she needed something to fill the quiet between us. "Fine. Busy." She nodded, then did that thing she always did, starting a sentence and stopping halfway. "You've just been different lately. Not bad different. Just..." She let it drop, but the pause hung there, almost visible, stretching between us. I sat back and wiped my palms on my jeans. "Wi-Fi should work now, I think." "You think?" she teased, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She tried the connection on her phone. The screen lit her face, giving her this soft glow. She bit her lip when it loaded, and for a second she looked younger. Or maybe just more open. "Well," she said breathlessly, "you fixed it." Her hand touched my arm, fingertips light, barely there. "A thank you, but not just a thank you." I should have stood up, made some joke, broken the tension. Instead, neither of us moved. "You know," she murmured, "I didn't expect you to come over so quickly. I almost didn't text. I was nearby." I lied without thinking. Her eyes flicked down, then back to mine. Slower this time. "That's nice." The house felt warmer, the silence thicker, my pulse louder than her words. Then a sharp sound. The front door rattled. We both flinched. Her hand dropped from my arm. Her face shifted, fast, like she was rearranging her expression before someone else saw it. She whispered, barely audible, "Stay here," and she stood up just as the door handle turned. The door didn't open all the way, just a quick jiggle of the handle, then silence. She exhaled, long and shaky, like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. When she turned back toward me, her expression was composed again. Too composed. "Probably the wind," she said, even though we both knew it wasn't. She sat down on the edge of the couch, elbows on her knees, rubbing her thumb across her palm. A nervous habit. I'd seen it before, but never this clearly. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, but her eyes flicked away. "Just a long week." I hesitated, then took a seat on the floor beside her. Not at her feet, just close enough she could pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. Her voice shifted, softer. "You ever get tired of people expecting you to be something you're not?" Came out of nowhere, but not really. She'd always carried this undercurrent. like she lived half her life quietly apologizing for the parts of herself she didn't show. I pulled one knee up and rested my arm on it. All the time, she glanced at me, like she didn't fully believe I had anything worth hiding. You're young. It's different for you. Maybe. Still happens. Her eyes softened in that slow, reluctant way she had, like she wanted to trust the moment but didn't give herself permission easily. My ex used to say I was too intense, she said. Too much. I think I learned to dial everything down just to keep the peace. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. Sometimes she talked too much when she was trying not to break. And now I live in this quiet house, she continued, her voice thinning around the edges. And I'm still dialing myself down for nobody. A strand of hair fell forward. Without thinking, she tucked it behind her ear, but her hand lingered at her neck, thumb brushing lightly along her collarbone. A tiny gesture, but my chest tightened again, the way it had in the living room earlier. You're not too much, I said. Her breath hitched. Just once. Barely there. She stood abruptly and crossed to the kitchen counter. You want something to drink? Sure. She poured water into 2 glasses, but her hand trembled slightly when she set one down. The sound of glass on would cracked the quiet. You're watching me, she said without looking up. My gut twisted. Sorry. No. She finally looked at me, really looked. I didn't say stop. The air thinned between us. She stepped closer, and the space felt charged again. Her sweater brushing my arm, the warmth of her skin radiating through it. You shouldn't, she whispered, though her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. Her thumb moved. Not a stroke, just a hesitant press, like she wasn't sure if she meant to touch me at all. I know, I said. We stood inches apart, both pretending we didn't hear how loud each other's breathing had become. She pulled her hand back slowly, fingers dragging just a second longer than necessary. Thank you for fixing the Wi-Fi, she murmured. But her tone said something else entirely. And before I could answer, she stepped even closer. Close enough I felt her breath skim my cheek, and whispered, I'm glad you came. She didn't step back right away. If anything, she hovered there, like she wasn't sure which direction was safer. Away from me or closer. My phone buzzed in my pocket, loud in the quiet. We both flinched. Go ahead, she murmured quickly, but her eyes didn't shift from my face. I pulled it out, saw the name, her son, my friend, and froze. A single text. Hey, you at my place later? Mom said something about needing help. The breath left my body. She saw the name before I could turn the screen. Her shoulders stiffened, and she looked away fast. Too fast. You should probably answer that, she whispered. But I didn't. I put the phone face down on the counter. That's complicated, I said. She let out this tiny sound, almost a laugh, but with no humor in it. Everything about this is complicated. She moved toward the window, arms crossing loosely as if she needed something to hold on to. Late afternoon light caught the strands of hair near her jawline. Her posture looked pulled tight, like she was bracing herself for something she didn't want to hear. You're looking at me like, she started, then stopped. She shook her head, frustrated with herself. I shouldn't say anything. I stepped toward her before I could think. Like what? She turned. Slowly. Her eyes moved over me in this hesitant sweep, like she was forcing herself not to linger. Like I'm not supposed to be looked at, she said. Not by you. I swallowed hard. I don't see why not. Her fingers twitched at her elbow. She dropped her arms, letting them fall to her sides. You're 20. People talk. Your friend. She stopped again, chewing the inside of her cheek. If he walked in right now. My chest tightened. The thought of him walking in made the air between us feel sharper, but somehow even more electric. He didn't, I said. And he won't. That's not the point, she whispered. I took another step. Barely anything, but I felt the pull of it. She watched me, breath shallow. Don't, she said softly, though she didn't move. I'm not. I don't want to mess up your life. You're not. Her eyes flicked to my mouth for half a second, Not long enough to be obvious, but long enough to knock something loose inside me. "I'm serious," she said, but her voice didn't match the words. I lifted a hand, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and brushed a loose strand of hair back behind her ear. My fingertips grazed her cheek. Warm, softer than I expected. Her breath caught immediately. "That's..." Her voice broke. "That's exactly what I mean." She didn't step back. Instead, she looked at me like she was weighing her entire life in one moment. Her chest rose, fell, rose again. She inched forward, barely an inch, but it felt like the room tilted. "If I..." she swallowed. "If I kissed you right now, I don't think I'd be able to stop." My heart hammered. "I'm not asking you to stop." A knock exploded at the front door. We jumped apart, but not far. Her hand found my wrist instinctively, gripping it as if she needed me anchored there. "Don't move," she whispered, breath trembling. "Please." The doorbell rang again, sharper this time. Her fingers tightened around mine, and neither of us let go. Her hand was still wrapped around my wrist when the knocking finally stopped. Silence spread through the house in slow waves, thick and humming. She didn't let go. "Whoever it was," I whispered, "they're gone." She nodded, but she stayed frozen, her fingers still curled around me. Her thumb rested against my pulse. I felt it jump, and so did she. Her eyes flicked down, noticing. "You need to calm down," she murmured, voice unsteady. "I can't," I said. "Not when you..." She dropped my wrist as if it burned her. She walked away fast, almost startled, one hand covering her mouth like she'd said too much. I followed, not too close, but close enough to feel the air shifting around her. She stopped at the edge of the hallway, leaning a hand against the wall, shoulders tight, chin bowed. "This is getting out of hand," she whispered. "I can't think straight around you." I stepped behind her, slow, unsure. "Then don't think." She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh and almost like defeat. "You don't understand. I haven't felt like this in a long time." She paused. "I didn't think I ever would again." Her voice cracked slightly on again. That tiny break cut deeper than anything else. "I'm not trying to make your life harder," I said. She turned, finally facing me. Her eyes were glossy but not sad. More like she was fighting something inside herself. "You're not. That's the problem." She laughed under her breath, a soft, disbelieving sound. "You make it too easy to want this." Her confession hit the air between us like heat rising. "And I'm scared of what that means," she added. I moved closer, stopping inches away. My hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed her hair back from her face. The same gesture as before, but slower this time, deliberate. My fingers skimmed the side of her neck, warm beneath her skin. She closed her eyes for a second. Just one. But it was enough to see how much she felt. When she opened them again, something raw flashed across her expression. "You don't know the things I've been through," she said. "The reasons I keep people at a distance." "Then let me in," I murmured. Her breath hitched. She stepped forward until her chest nearly brushed mine. I felt the warmth of her body, the subtle rise and fall of her breathing. She was so close I could smell the faint sweetness of whatever she'd put on that morning. She lifted her hand to my shirt, barely touching it, fingers hovering as though she was testing the idea of pulling me in. Her eyes drifted to my mouth again, not accidentally this time. "This can't happen," she whispered, but her hand closed on my shirt anyway. I leaned in, just enough that my forehead almost touched hers. The air between us felt thin, hungry. "Tell me to stop," I said softly. She didn't. Her fingers tightened. Her lips parted, inches from mine, breath brushing warm across my skin. She whispered, voice trembling. "I should walk away." But she didn't walk away. And just as the space between us began to collapse, a breath, a heartbeat, a half step more, her phone lit up on the counter behind us. A name flashed across the screen. She glanced over my shoulder, saw who it was, and froze. Her voice, barely audible. "Oh God, not now." The name glowing on her phone froze everything. Her eyes locked on the screen, and the color drained from her face in a way I'd never seen before. Not fear exactly, something heavier. Something she'd been bracing for. I stepped back half an inch, just enough to give her space, but my chest felt tight instantly, like the gap between us hurt more than it should. She reached for the phone with an unsteady hand, her thumb hovering above the screen without touching it. The light flickered across her face, highlighting the tension in her jaw, the way her breath stuttered. "Who is it?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. The phone buzzed again, vibrating sharply against the counter. She closed her eyes like the sound physically struck her. Finally, she whispered, "It's my ex." I blinked. "You told me you two didn't talk." "We don't." Her voice cracked. "We're not supposed to." The phone lit up again, a text preview appearing just long enough for both of us to catch the first line. "I heard something about you and—" She snatched it up, screen turned away from me. A cold wave ran down my spine. Someone heard something? About us? About me? Her breathing quickened, almost shaking. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "No one was supposed to—" She stopped herself, biting the rest of the sentence back hard. "What did he say?" I asked. She still didn't show me the phone. Instead, she locked it and pressed it face down against her chest, like she needed to hide the words even from the air. Her voice was low, fragile. "My neighbor saw earlier, when the door rattled. She must have told him." I felt heat rise up my neck, not embarrassment. Something closer to frustration, protectiveness, and something I didn't want to name. "So your ex is checking up on you?" I said. "Why does he even care?" She stepped back as if the question pushed her physically. She leaned against the counter, hand gripping the edge until her knuckles whitened. "He and we ended badly," she said. "Really badly. And he always acted like my choices weren't my own." Her throat tightened. "He still thinks he gets to judge them." The anger in her voice was quiet but sharp, like a blade dulled by too many years of being used. I moved closer without thinking. "You don't owe him anything." She looked up at me then, really looked, and something inside her shifted. Guilt, frustration, longing all tangled into one raw expression. "That's where you're wrong," she whispered. "I owe him the truth. Or at least I used to." Her voice thinned. "But if he thinks something is happening between us, if people think that—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. I stepped closer, slow, deliberate. Her breath caught. She didn't move away this time. Her fingers trembled as she set the phone down, her hand brushing mine by accident, or not by accident. The touch jolted both of us. "You're scared," I said softly. She shook her head, but her eyes stayed on mine, wide and unguarded. "I'm scared of what I'll do if you stay." Her words shouldn't have hit the way they did, but they did. She tried to move past me, but I shifted just enough that her shoulder grazed my chest. A soft, accidental collision that stole her breath and mine. She stopped, completely. Then, very quietly, she said, "Maybe I don't want you to go." And that was the moment, the choice that pushed us past the point we'd been pretending didn't exist. Her words hung between us like a held breath. "Maybe I don't want you to go." For a second, neither of us moved. The house felt too small for the two of us and everything we weren't saying. A soft hum from the fridge broke the silence, but even that sounded distant, like it belonged to another world. I stepped toward her. Not enough to trap her, just enough that she'd feel the warmth from my body. She inhaled sharply, chest rising, shoulders tightening as if bracing for impact. "You don't want me to go," I said quietly, "but you're afraid to let me stay." She let out a shaky exhale. "Yes." Her honesty was softer than a confession and heavier than one. She pressed her palm flat on the counter, steadying herself, then turned her face slightly toward me, close enough that the warmth of her breath reached my cheek. "I'm tired," she whispered, "of being careful, of pretending I don't feel anything when I do." Her voice cracked in the middle, and it wasn't pretty. It was raw, unguarded, real. I reached out slowly, giving her every second to pull away, and rested my hand on her waist. Gentle, nothing more. She didn't flinch. In fact, her breath caught, and she leaned into my palm by a fraction that felt louder than a shout. "You're trembling," I murmured. "I know." She let out a breath that trembled too. "I hate that you notice everything. I can't help it." Her eyes flicked up to mine, hesitant but unblinking. She stepped closer on her own this time, closing the space until our bodies weren't touching but the air between us felt impossibly thin. "If we do this," she said, "there's no going back." I swallowed hard. "I don't want to go back." She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her finally broke open. All the fear, all the hesitation, all the guilt she'd carried alone. It showed in the tiny details. The way she bit her lip, the slight arch of her shoulders, the way her fingers hovered near my chest like she wanted to touch me but wasn't sure she deserved to. "I've been lonely," she admitted softly, and not in the dramatic way, just quietly, for years. I stepped closer, until my forehead almost brushed hers. "You don't have to be." Her breath hitched. "You say that like it's simple." "It's not," I said. "But I mean it." Her eyes fluttered shut, just for a second, and I felt her hand finally land on my chest. A light touch, barely anything, but enough to pull every nerve in my body tight. "You make me feel seen," she whispered. Her confession wasn't polished. It was uneven, almost clumsy, but it hit with the weight of something she'd kept buried for too long. I lifted my hand and traced my thumb under her jaw, slow enough that she could stop me. She didn't. Her lips parted, breath shallow. She leaned forward until our noses brushed, barely, the lightest touch imaginable. A whisper, not a kiss, not yet. "What happens?" she murmured, voice trembling. "If I let myself want this?" I closed the final inch, not touching her mouth but close enough to feel the warmth of it. "Then we stop pretending." Her fingers curled into the fabric of my shirt, pulling me a fraction closer. And in that moment, breath to breath, heartbeat to heartbeat, everything between us finally came into focus. She opened her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't look away. For a long moment, we just stood there, her hand gripping my shirt, my forehead resting against hers, both of us suspended in a breath we hadn't released yet. Then she exhaled, a soft, shaky release that carried months, maybe years of things she'd swallowed down. "I'm scared," she whispered again, but the tone had changed, less of a warning, more of a truth she needed to say out loud. "I know," I answered. "Me too." She huffed a tiny laugh, the kind that wasn't really a laugh but a tired acknowledgement. Her shoulders loosened. Her hand slid from my shirt to my chest, then down to my forearm, her fingers brushing small circles there like she was grounding herself. "I kept telling myself this couldn't happen," she murmured. "That you'd come to your senses, or I'd push you away enough times that you'd stop trying." "I wasn't trying," I said. "I was just showing up." Her eyes softened. "Exactly. And that terrified me." She stepped back half a pace, but not far, just enough to see me clearly. Her hand stayed on my arm, warm and steady. "I didn't want to be some middle-aged mistake you look back on and regret," she said, voice thinning on the last word. "And I didn't want to be something you were ashamed of," I answered quietly. Her breath hitched, not from surprise, from recognition. We'd both been circling the same fear without naming it. I reached for her hand, slowly, letting her see every inch of movement, and threaded my fingers through hers. She looked down at our hands, as if the sight alone made something inside her unravel. "You're not a mistake," I said. "Not to me." She blinked hard. "And you're not something I'm ashamed of. You never were." The room felt warmer now. The tension that had held everything tight was loosening, replaced with something gentler, steadier. She moved closer again, until her chest brushed mine lightly, like she was relearning what it felt like to stand near someone she trusted. Her other hand came up to my cheek, thumb grazing along my jaw. Not rushed, not hesitant, just real. "I don't know where this goes," she said softly. "I'm not pretending it'll be easy. I'm not asking for easy. She let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. Then she lifted her face and touched her forehead to mine again. Not a desperate pull, not a hungry moment, just a quiet, intimate closeness that felt stronger than anything we'd done before. I wrapped my arms around her, slowly, and she melted into the space against my chest like she'd been holding herself up for too long. Her hands slid behind my back, fingertips gripping lightly. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We just stood there, holding each other, the world outside slowing down enough for both of us to breathe again. After a long while, she whispered against my neck, "So, you're staying?" I tightened my arms around her. "Yeah, I'm here." She smiled. A small, tired, honest smile, and rested her head against me. And for the first time, neither of us pulled away. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?